This is the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game.
Rule number one is you have to believe in yourself. You're the only one who doesn't think you belong in this appointment. The prospect has already validated your existence by scheduling time with you. Get it through your head you belong here, go in there, crush it, and close the deal.
A place where sales professionals can come to learn from other sales professionals and thought leaders that have mastered their craft.
The difference between a good salesperson and a best-in-class salesperson is only 2 minutes. By spending an extra 2 minutes on what you might think is a mundane task in the sales game, you separate yourselves from the pack, you grow your book of business, you close more deals, and you retain your accounts.
As well as their peers who are still striving for perfection to achieve their why.
I have a wife and 4 kids. Failure is not an option.
Real sales professionals, real stories, real results.
It's no different than being a professional baseball player. You can't be a one-trick pony. You have to be a 5-tool player in order to succeed in this game.
This is the Power Producers Podcast, production redefined. Are you ready to feel the power?
Hey everybody, I'm excited to have Mr. Josh Gurley with us today. Kyle and I are going to be having a conversation with him for the next little bit. Josh got my attention inside of the Insurance Agency Owners Alliance on a thread probably after my bedtime one night where we were going back and forth, and I realized this dude knows what he's talking about. He seems to think very similarly to what Kyle and I do, and I decided I'd reach out to him, and we talked back and forth, and he told me a little bit about his story and decided, you know what, let's have him on the podcast, see what happens. He had just flown cross country, I think, from closing a big deal right around the same time we met. So, Josh, it's good to have you on, man.
Good to be here, David. Appreciate you having me on. Absolutely.
So tell everybody where you came from and how you got to where you're at. I know that you've got a unique story, so give them the elevator pitch first, and we'll dive in as we go.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in a really small town, maybe 20,000 people in the whole county, lake community. A lot of people would go there, have lake houses and vacation, that type of thing. Just had a great time there, played a lot of team sports growing up.
Is that at Hartwell? Were you on Lake Hartwell? I thought I saw that on Facebook or something.
Yeah. So grew up on Lake Hartwell. When I say it was small, David, I mean it was really small. The road that I lived on was called Lou Gurley Road. Okay, and it was named after my aunt or my great aunt. And so if you went down the road, you would see our house on the left, and then about 100 yards down was my grandmother's house and grandfather's house, and then if you went about another mile, you would see literally my great grandparents' house all on the same street. And so there was a lot of people that had interesting names in my family. I had one that was named Parson Pontius, and I had one that was named Lula May, and all different kind of names. So we were the typical Southern family that just never left this one street.
That's a beautiful area, though, man. I remember when my parents lived up in the Carolinas, I lived in Birmingham, and we would cut across 20 and then go north to visit them. My dad was in the furniture industry at the time, so they were in that High Point, Winston-Salem area, and you drive right past Lake Hartwell going up the interstate to get there. When I was a kid, we would go to Lake Kiowee up in South Carolina, and that's where we would do all our water skiing. Like literally every summer that I was a kid growing up, we would go water skiing.
I'm sure you were an awesome water skier.
Much better than I am now, I can assure you. Although I bet you that the freaking wall of water I could throw up on a single slalom.
You're definitely more buoyant these days.
Yeah, probably so. But yeah, that's a cool. That's a beautiful area. I mean, it's probably a cool place to grow up.
Oh yeah, it was definitely a cool place to grow up. We had probably somewhere between 50 and 100 acres of land, and so we were always in the woods riding 4-wheelers, doing the stuff that country boys do. And so yeah, it was really good. Like I said, I played a lot of team sports, played football growing up, played high school. We were a pretty good football team. Actually made it to the state championship and got our heart broken back in 2000 or 1999, some point, long time ago, 20 years ago now. But really enjoyed that. Went to college, went to the University of Georgia, and I graduated from there. Was kind of surprised. Everybody was kind of surprised by me because I was kind of an athlete, kind of class clown kind of guy. And then I ended up graduating third in my high school class out of maybe 200 people. So I know the look you had is the look I had. They announced it.
What I was thinking about is the fact that I was with you until you got to the third in class, and then I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So somehow I managed to make some pretty good grades and got accepted to UGA and went there. And then I got a degree in risk management and insurance. And I don't really know why I did that. My dad was a school superintendent. My mom was a kindergarten teacher. And my dad had just hired this person. And in fact, he was in Athens, Clark County, which is where University of Georgia is. So a lot of people or business people around town knew who my dad was. And so he had just hired somebody to be a risk manager at the school system. And it was a new position for them back in like 2003. And he said, hey, why don't you ought to consider doing this. And then my dad also was involved with the Georgia School Boards Association and who has a workers' comp fund for all the different educators. So he was really involved in helping recruit people to kind of start that, other counties. And that was really my first introduction to insurance and to risk management, was just through my dad saying, hey, this might be something that you could have an interest in. So I picked the major and ended up graduating from University of Georgia, I think around 2007 with that degree.
Cool deal. So what did you do coming out of Georgia?
So believe it or not, my hair used to be a lot longer than it is on this video here. And
is that the story? Are we getting to why you have a guitar hanging behind you now?
Yeah, we're definitely getting there. So
I figured.
So I was interested in a lot of different things, but playing music was the thing that I was the most interested in. And so I ended up just through some acquaintances and through some friends, I met an artist or a couple artists, and I started traveling around playing guitar while I was in college. And so pretty much every single weekend I was hitting the road, and we were going to a different town in Georgia, or sometimes we would even get on airplanes. I mean, I think if you total it all up, we played in probably 20 or so states, ranging from, South Florida all the way to Michigan, the East Coast. Never made it farther west than about Oklahoma. But I was all over the place. I was burning up the road, and I was a lot more interested in playing music than I was in getting a degree. Luckily, I did get a degree, and I did manage to graduate with honors. So if I have any clients or customers or people listening, I definitely did pretty good in school. I just like playing music more. And so I hit the road for 3 years, and I played guitar full time, various places and for different people. And I had a blast. And I got to tell you, other than team sports, it was one of the biggest influences in my entire life, because I was pretty introverted at the time, and really I'm still an introvert for the most part. But it really helped me get out of my shell a lot, because you would go and you would play, and people would want to talk to you, and there were a lot of different things that you had to do. So it was a good thing for me, I think, in the long run. But it definitely delayed the start of my career, which I had no problem with. And honestly, if I hadn't met my wife, Ashley, I probably would still be on the road somewhere playing guitar. But when I met her, I realized I had to do something that was going to make a few more bucks than playing my guitar.
So you're being very nondescript about who you traveled with or played with. Who's the biggest name?
Well, so all the music that I played was really involved around church. And so we played a lot of different conferences. I guess Third Day was a pretty popular band that used to play around a lot. They were probably the largest Christian
Third Day
band.
solid. They were at the time, and I think they probably got superseded when Mercy Me started to get a little bit more notoriety. But man, the Mac from Third Day had that rasp in his voice They're solid, man. No, I know contemporary Christian music very, very well.
And so I know, I mean, I didn't play with those guys, but the band that I was in, we did some shows where, you know, we kind of would be the sort of the opening group, and then they came on, and we did a lot of stuff with a lot of different associations. I mean, kind of an interesting story. James Lankford, he's a United States Senator from Oklahoma. And prior to being a senator, he was actually the camp director at Falls Creek Camp in Oklahoma, which Falls Creek Camp is the largest Christian camp in America. They run 7,000 students a week through Falls Creek for I want to say like 10 weeks during the summer. And so we did a lot of music there, and it was just interesting that I got to spend some time with Senator Lankford before he was actually a senator. But yeah, I mean, if you want me to give you the non-humble answer, I think over that 3 years I played in front of about 1 million people, and we were playing events that were 2, 3, 4, 5, 10,000 people, every single week. So pretty cool experience I had.
That will definitely help you not be an introvert.
Yeah, I didn't have much choice, and I had to sit at the merch table. And if you've ever been involved in anything like that, you understand that that merch is one of the biggest ways that you generate income in that business. So definitely had to do a lot of that. But yeah, so I met Ashley, and I kind of bummed around Athens after I graduated, because Athens is a really cool place to be. A lot of good people there. And so I ended up meeting my wife on a blind date. And I know this doesn't sound relevant to insurance, but I promise it is.
It's all relevant.
So I met Ashley on a blind date. I didn't know what she looked like. I had no clue. And she was late to the first date. I was kind of frustrated by that. And so I was sitting there in the parking lot, and I was thinking to myself, come on, girl. And then she came down the stairs, and I said, come on, girl. She was beautiful. I mean, she was a knockout. And I decided at that moment, I was like, I'm gonna figure out how to convince this girl to marry me, which is still the greatest sales job I've ever done. Was to convince her to marry me. And in fact, it was kind of like one of those meetings. I don't know if you've ever been in a meeting with a prospect where you say, hey, I want to come meet with you for 30 minutes and have a conversation. And that 30 minutes turns into 3 hours. And typically on those meetings where you go from 30 minutes to 3 hours, that typically works out pretty well for you. Especially, I try to be really respectful of people's time. If I tell them I'm going to take 30 minutes of their time, when the 30 minutes is up, I'll say, hey, the 30 minutes is up. Do you want to keep going? I'll be glad to take off, and we can reschedule something later on. And that's kind of how that date went, right? We got to the end of the dinner, and I said, hey, you ready to go home? And she said, well, maybe we could go figure something else out. So we went to a local Athens watering hole and spent some time there. And it was about 10 o'clock. And I said, hey, you want to go home, or you want to keep hanging out? Things were starting to shut down kind of downtown. And she said, hey, let's go to a movie. So we go to the movie theater, and we get there, and the only thing that's playing is like Freddy versus Jason. So here I am with the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my entire life. And it's 11 o'clock at night, and we're watching Freddy versus Jason. And the date went great. Ended up taking her home that night. And then we were pretty much inseparable for the rest of the time. And so I got into, and then I started realizing, hey, being on the road and traveling around all the time is not really something that I should be doing anymore. And so I said, I guess it's time for me to get myself a real job and a real career. So that's the Cliff Notes version of the moment I got into insurance.
Yeah, but that didn't work out well for you the first time around, did it?
No, it definitely did not work out very well for me the first time. So
I think that's one of the things that intrigued me about talking to you, man. You were pretty transparent about that to some random guy that was chatting you up on Messenger one night.
Well, I think that transparency is something that is missing a lot in our world. And I think that we live in this Insta famous world where everything has to be perfect and everybody has to be perfect. And the reality is that none of us are perfect. and we all have made mistakes. And I just thought that telling a story of kind of what happened to me would be something that maybe could benefit somebody else that was out there. And if they were wondering how in the world could they do this? And
listen, man, it's no different than your testimony if you get up and talk in front of people at church. Somebody's going to benefit from it. Somebody's going through exactly what you went through and dealt with it the same way that you would deal with it. And if you can make a difference in one person because of what you have to say, then it's worth you sharing that story. But I think that there's a lot of people out there, you know, that have dipped their toe in the water, right? They thought, oh, this is a great job for me. I think I can do it. Let me try it. And then the next thing you know, maybe they put a year in, maybe not even a year. Maybe they put 6 months in and make up their mind. Oh, I'm done. I'll die on the vine until my year's up and I'll be over and done with it. And, you know, that's not how it works in this industry. I mean, at all.
Right. Yeah. And I think I had I believe that the only reason that people get out of the insurance business is because they don't sell enough insurance. And I know that sounds really harsh. It sounds like, God, Josh, you have no heart. But as a guy that didn't sell enough insurance, I can just tell you that that's the only reason that you would get out of the business. And I want to draw kind of just a really stark contrast, okay, to my life now, because I'm really not a total loser at this point. But I want to draw a contrast because I just think this is important. I renewed an account last week that is $43,000 in revenue. And the whole first year when I started in insurance, my total first year production was $18,000 in revenue for one entire year. And so, I look at the month of April, and myself and my team, and we didn't talk about this before, but another producer in our office, I got two partners, so there's three of us total owners in the agency, and one of my other partners and I, we started I won't really say a program, but kind of a marketing company, and we market to a specific group of manufacturers. And so through that, we have written, it really totals about $150,000 per year in revenue, something to that effect. Between all the customers, the new ones that we write, the total premium on the book is somewhere between, I would say 4.5 and $5 million now. And so in the month of April alone, we have quite a few renewals. And so we renewed over $100,000 in that program alone in the month of April in revenue. So I sit here and I look at myself now and I say, we're renewing, 5 times in 1 month what I wrote that first year. So you want me to just to kind of tell how that first year went?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Kyle wants to hear it. He's going on his third year.
So and so I'm in year number 6 now. But this is back in 2011. All right. And 2011, I'm pretty gung ho. I get started. I have a sales coach, and he was kind of a person that said, hey, you need to build this book of personal lines. And it was really difficult for me because here I was in a new town. My wife and I, we got married. I started this job, and somehow I bought a house. And I think the only way that I could afford to buy a house was I had a part-time job. So I was a insurance producer full-time. I was a part-time music director at a church here locally. And I was doing the best that I knew how to do to get by. And the other really unfortunate thing happened in that first year, and I don't think I told you this, was my dad was diagnosed with cancer. Mm-hmm. And it was something that nobody that is in their mid-20s wants to hear about, right? Nobody wakes up one day and says, the thing that I'm expecting today is my dad to have cancer. And so it really just, I think, threw me for a loop. I think it really prevented me from putting myself out there, because I had a lot of worry, I had a lot of angst, a lot of concern about my dad's health. And it was such a surprise because he was very healthy. He was not no alcohol, no tobacco, no, exercise regularly, and was diagnosed with lung cancer. And I mean, it just knocked us all to the ground. And what turned out to be what started out being a simple biopsy that they thought was maybe some scar tissue in his lung from working, working on his family farm growing up, that it ended up being cancer. And they removed 20% of his lung. I'm not a doctor, but I think you have 5 lobes in your lung. And so they removed one of the 5 lobes in his lung. And so that whole first year of being a producer was just filled with, a lot of worry, a lot of angst, just a lot of wondering if my dad was going to make it. And plus I was getting married in about 6 months. And so I'll never forget this for the rest of my life. And literally the day before I got married, my dad took a chemo treatment. So he takes a chemo treatment and he drives 150 miles, goes to the rehearsal dinner, and then he's at the wedding all day the next day. And so if that just tells you how tough of a guy my dad was, they named a building after him in Athens, in fact. So he was a really, really, really good guy. But yeah, I think my mind was just in a lot of different places, and you can't really have your mind in different places to do this. And a lot of that was on my dad's health. A lot of it was just, getting married and just my production. It suffered as a result. And so I just lost a lot of confidence, regardless of the reasons. I mean, regardless of what was going on in my life. I mean, the bottom line was I didn't produce enough insurance. And I think it's probably, understandable. But I was just in not a very good mental frame during that time. And so, luckily my dad, he ended up going into a remission. But that really didn't lift a lot of the burden that I had. I mean, I had a ton of this just burden of worry about my dad's health and worried about my mom and different things like that. And so I just got to a point to where I sat down and I said, okay, well, I have a sick father. I have no production or very little production to speak of. I have a wife and she was working and we were fine financially, but it was just not going the way that I wanted it to go. And so I remember like it was yesterday, I just made the decision that with everything I had going on in my life and with my family, I said, I just can't do this. I'm just not in the mental frame to do this. And then I decided I was going to go get a job elsewhere. And so I ended up applying for a job and got a job as an underwriter, a farm underwriter for Georgia Farm Bureau, which didn't last very long. I went there for about 3 months, and then the story kind of heats up. So I guess before I go there, do you have any questions about anything I said before?
No, I mean, I think the one thing that I heard, I'm looking at this from a parent's perspective, right? Because your perspective changes and yours is going to change as your kids get older too. I know you have kids now, right?
Yep.
But, my oldest son is 17 and, I can almost tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt, if I was the dad that took a chemo treatment, drove 150 miles to be at the wedding the next day, there's not a snowball's chance I'd let you use my health as an excuse for your lack of production. You know what I mean? Sure. I think your dad would have not want you to think that way. And it's interesting because I think sometimes when you look at things from 1,000, 10,000 feet, away, it's easier to get perspective on things. But the other thing that I heard is there's not a snowball's chance you're ever going to fail at anything because you have that DNA.
Yeah.
And, if my dad and I don't always do things the same way, but we're equally as bullheaded and equally as driven. And so that has made for some epic clashes over the years, but there's a lot of the fabric in who I am that came from him. So it's interesting to hear you talk about your dad that way. It sounds like, you had a really good relationship with him and he was pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's definitely that's definitely an understatement. He was, even now I think back a lot in decisions that I make, and I think about a lot of the things that he told me, and those things definitely help me now. So here I was, like I said, didn't sell enough insurance, and I was an underwriter, underwriting agricultural equipment. and it was the most miserable 3 or 4 months of my life. I was sitting in a tiny cube. I remember I almost had a panic attack the first day because I had to punch a code on my phone to go to the bathroom, and I thought there's no way I can ever live this way. And so I ended up having a relationship with somebody from my production days, and he was an RVP of an insurance company of Utica National, and he posted a job for a territory manager, and I called him and pretty much begged for the job. I said, I met you when I was a producer. I'm miserable. Can you give me an opportunity? And he did. And he gave me an opportunity, and I was a marketing rep for 3 years, and I was driving around to insurance agencies all over Georgia, and it really gave me an opportunity to see a lot of good producers at work. I think there are a lot of really talented people in our state that work. I think that there's a lot of worthy competition out there, and so it was a good opportunity to get to observe them. And, unfortunately, my dad ended up, we had one good Christmas with him in 2012. The cancer came back in 2013, and then he died early in 2014. And so, that was really a hard thing to go through when you're 29 years old, and it's something that you're not really expecting. But I have to tell you, when it was over, I kind of breathed this big sigh of relief and said, well, he's not suffering anymore. I believe that he had peace, and we had peace as a family. And as hard as it was to let him go, I think it just was something that I wasn't worried about anymore. And
you know what, man, I think that what you said though points to something that is really important for people that you're younger than I am, but not that much younger than I am. But all of us, Kyle's getting ready to have his first child in June with all the other nonsense that's going on. You were 29 years old, man. You still needed your dad.
Yeah.
And I think that parents need to keep that into perspective, that it doesn't necessarily matter that you're 29 years old. That's a relationship that you need in your life. And it's one of the things that with me, I consciously invest. I mean, sadly, I hate to say this because it could get taken the wrong way, but I literally have to schedule individual time with each one of my 4 kids. Like I put it on a calendar to make sure that it happens. And it shouldn't be that way, but that's how busy my life is right now. And it's important enough to me to make sure that if I'm going to take my little girl to breakfast on a Saturday morning, which obviously I can't do right now, that goes on the calendar and I don't miss it. And I think that a lot of times, people are so hell-bent, and, even some of the younger, my 17-year-old, he's at that point right now. He's ready to get out of the house, man. He wants to go do his own thing and, get out into the world. And he asked me, what you think? And I told him, I said, I think you need to go out and fall on your face. That's exactly what I think. Maybe that's not what you want to hear from me, but right now you don't really listen to much about what I've given you for advice, and everything I've told you has pretty much happened. So maybe you just need to have life kick you in the nuts a little bit and figure it out.
Yeah. Well, it certainly is one of the best ways that you can learn. And so, here I am. I'm working for Utica. I got a company car, cell phone, pretty good gig. I tell people, hey, if you want a job in the insurance industry, that's a good job. If you're a pretty outgoing person, but maybe you don't want to be an insurance producer, that the marketing rep job is a great job to have. And I know a lot of people that do that job, and they do it real well. And so, it
has a fantastic expense account, from what I understand and what I've witnessed firsthand.
Yeah, you definitely.
Hey, let me ask you this, man. When you were at Utica, did you know Matt Lapino or Matt Wisnett?
Yes. So Matt Lapino was he was a RVP, but he was in a different region than I was. I knew who he was. He's like the CEO of a work comp company now, right? Is that right?
Of FHM, yeah. He's a good friend of mine. Him and Wisnett, we have a really good relationship with FHM. We do a lot of business with them. But I knew they were both Utica guys at the time.
Yeah, he was a Utica lifer, I think, prior to that, and I still tell people today. My manager, Chris Eels, if he's hearing this, he'll probably say it's not true, but he's one of the most influential people that I've ever had a part. Anybody that's ever had a part of my career, Chris was very influential, and the company was great. I mean, they were good to me, and still good to us today. I mean, we do business with them, and write a pretty good amount of business with Utica today. So it's been a good relationship, and they've supported us. So all in all, it was a really good experience being with them. But there was just something in my heart that said, "Here I am. I want to try this again." And so I went back to the agency that I was working at before, and the agency was going to change hands. It had been in the same family for a long time, probably around 70 years. And so it was changing hands to a third party, somebody that had come in. He was actually an alpha agent. I asked him before this if I could use his name. He said, "Only if you paint me in a glowing light." So I'm going to try to do that. But one of my other partners, Waylon Smith, he was an alpha agent for many years and ended up going independent. 10 or 11, 12 years ago now. And so he was set to buy the agency in January of 2015. And so we talked, and we felt like it was a good time for me to come back and give it a go. And so since that time, from a production standpoint, definitely been very successful. Had a good year that first year, have been, over six figures in production consistently year in and year out. So yeah, it's just it's been great. I love the insurance business. I think it's just a really great career. There's a lot of freedom. I've created, I think financial freedom for my family and then time freedom with my family. And those are two things that are really important, especially the time. My wife is at home with our kids, and she loves being a mom. She works really hard at it and does a really good job. So it's just been a really good 6 years back in the business.
Do you attribute the change in production to just obviously the changes in the personal life, or did you start attacking it differently? Like what kind of changed for you to turn things around aside from the obvious?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I think not having not living in fear about my dad's health every day was something that made a big difference. But yeah, I mean, I think being a producer is, I think before I really thought it was about a certain personality type or a certain individual characteristic, but really I think now that I've been doing this for 6 years, it's more about a set of behaviors. And I think that a lot of the good producers that I have seen, they have a similar set of behaviors, and they have a similar, style of how they approach business. And so I just adopted some things that were different. I mean, education is something that's important to me. I've never really had any issues being a good insurance technician or anything like that. I mean, my degree's in risk management and insurance. I've got a CIC. I've done the whole certified work comp advisor deal. So I know a lot about the experience mod, lead with work comp, really talk to people about how they can control their cost. I know that's similar to the same way that you folks work, and just finding problems with mods and getting them corrected. And I think that one of the things that we have done is try to be really transparent and say, look, 80% of the people in our business are here to sell you as much insurance as you'll buy. And we think that only 20% of the people in our business are here to help you buy as little insurance as you need. So our goal is if your broker, if who you're working with, if they're doing all the things right, if they're in the 20%, if they're talking about anything but insurance, right, then we think that we're going to stay away from those people. But the people that are out there that are peddling insurance policies, those are the ones we're going after. We're going after the 80%, and we're just not really showing any mercy. We're going out there and we're finding issues. We're finding miscalculations on experienced mods, and we're exploiting those things, and we're winning business.
Yeah, well, I mean, so what's low-hanging fruit for you? I mean, I'll happily share what we're seeing too. I'm sure it's probably the same thing for all practical purposes, but what are you seeing for low-hanging fruit when you're out there?
What I see mostly is people that they don't have a very good renewal process, right? Maybe they wrote the account on the front end, but I mean, I wrote an account last week. I think I told you about it. It was like 26,000 in revenue, and it was some of the silliest things, right? I mean, it was just no drive other car coverage on the auto policy. It was just small things. I mean, they had $100,000 uncovered claim because somebody didn't update the equipment schedule. There were some states missing out of box 3A on the work comp. I mean, just some really small things that I think if people would better educate themselves, they wouldn't make those kind of mistakes. But hey, I'm thankful that they don't. I'm thankful that I've read the basic manual and they haven't. Right.
Listen, I'll tell you right now, man, you could stand on the mountaintops of Georgia and scream exactly what all of your competition should do, and they're not going to listen to you anyhow. That's what I've learned about this industry that's so crazy is the fact that it's natural selection at its finest. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can hand people a perfect strategy, and they're not willing to do what it takes to execute it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think this business is not that is just like at the end of the day, it's just not that hard. I remember one of the first accounts I called on. It was a bank publicly traded on the NASDAQ, and I walked into the account and wanted to talk to him and ended up getting back there to the CFO and then I didn't write it that year, I didn't write it the next year, but hey, 3 years later, ended up winning the account. And here I am, a guy from a town of 20,000 people went and wrote somebody that's publicly traded on the NASDAQ. So look, it's possible, right? And it's all about your behavior. I mean, one of my favorite authors, speakers, communicators, Andy Stanley, one of the things that he says, and Andy's a pastor, but he has a kind of a business type leadership podcast. But Andy says it's your direction, not your intention, that determines your destination. And I think a plan is like an intention. It's like, hey, here's our plan. This is what we think that we're going to do. But really, at the end of the day, it's just a plan. And it's the actual direction, it's the actual behaviors that you have that are going to determine where you end up in this business. And so I just think that there's a set of behaviors that people that are successful have, and that's what I've tried to follow. Actually, a friend of mine, he's a multi-million-dollar revenue producer was J. Smith Lanier, now Marsh, and he showed me the ropes and showed me some strategies that he uses, and he says just do it. Right, it's time to start doing what everybody else says they do, and that's really been the name of the game for the past 6 years.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, man. You find people that are successful, you ask them what makes them successful, you listen, and then you replicate it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no real secret sauce. Well, I mean, I guess there is. Each one of us can have our own spin on it, right? Like for me, if I'm going to go in and if I want to find a hook early, number one, it starts with how you prospect. So I'm not even wasting my time looking at accounts that have 0.75 experience mods. It doesn't make any sense for me to spend my time on that. Yeah, maybe you could get it down to a 0.65, but that's going to be way too much effort on my side to make minimal impact. You're already doing a lot of things right if that's the case. But if you're at a 1.3 all day, man, that's right in my wheelhouse. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to walk in and have you explain to me what your return to work program looks like. I need to understand what light duty in your operation looks like. And most of the time, and I'm sure you've experienced this, I'll walk into an account that's got a debit mod and I'll ask them about return to work. And they'll either say, we don't have a job counting paper clips, Or
Yep.
they'll say, oh yeah, we have that. And you know what? It goes in one ear and out the other because I know they don't have it. They can tell me they have it, but I'll just keep going full blast. Oh, so let me make sure I understand. So you've actually gone and met with the clinic to make sure that you've introduced yourself and explained the culture of your company, and they understand that you're a light duty employer and you want to do everything you can to get your injured workers back as quickly as possible. And then you actually have that letter that you send with the person to the doctor to remind them of who you are and all of that. And you have the offer letter. And I start going through all of the steps. And by the time I get to about 3 steps in of what a formal light duty program looks like, they don't have yeah. Well, now that you mentioned, I mean, Kyle's seen it happen in action multiple times.
Numerous times, sure.
But I mean,
almost every time, really, whenever we talk about it. I don't know that I have dealt with anyone who actually has a formal return to work program in place when we go in there and are discussing it with them. They say they do, but like you said, it's never it's never fully complete.
And I mean, if there's any young agents that are out there or older agents that want to learn a new trick, one of the things that I would tell them is if you want to figure out whether or not somebody has effective light duty and you want to do it on the fly, look at their loss runs when they're sitting across the table from you and see how many low dollar indemnity claims are on the loss runs. That's all you have to do. If you've got low dollar indemnity claims on the loss runs, you do not have return to work, period. It just doesn't happen. And so, a lot of times what we'll do, I don't know do you use Zywave or do you use another tool for mod audits?
Zywave, yeah.
Yeah, we use ModMaster and Broker Briefcase and all of that. So when we go in and we do that, a lot of the time I'll run 2 different ModMasters, right? So if we have the loss runs ahead of time, we'll run it as it is to validate that the mod's right, break out the points that are going to the different, injury types or by employee or however we're going to do it. Then in addition to that, I'll take the low dollar indemnity claims that would not have existed with return to work so that we get the 70% discount before the split point. I'll pull the indemnity out. I'll class them as medical only, and I'll show them what the swing could have been on their mod had they had light duty in place. There's no arguing at that point. I mean, I was in an account a couple months back where this person was just not getting it. Like I walked in, I had everything the way that I would normally present, and part of it was because they didn't want to get it, right? They had a relationship with the incumbent. It was very obvious. The only reason that I continued the meeting is because I was referred in by a very good friend of mine who's also a client. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to bite the bullet. Normally I cut this person off at the knees and be out. But it was an account that was probably 25 to 30,000 in revenue all in, but it was skewed on the property side. So the comp itself was only about 30,000 in manual premium. The mod was a 1.44, so it was closer to 50. And when I went in, I looked. This is the worst one I've ever seen in my life. They had a claim that was north of $75,000 total incurred, and of that 75,000, 500 was indemnity. Like, how does that even happen?
Yeah.
Right. And then they had another one where it was $6,800 and $150 was an indemnity. And I was telling the person that was the decision maker how much of an impact that it had, and they just didn't want to listen. I said, why did you not pay this out of pocket? Why didn't you let the carrier pay the indemnity and then invoice you for that indemnity so that you could pay them back and keep it off of your mod, because it would have saved you money? Well, I don't think that's how it works. And I said, well, with all due respect, this isn't my opinion. It's mathematics. Like this is how it works. And here's why I say that. And I pulled out the second one. And just those 2 claims, if they would have had return to work and not had the indemnity on the mod, it would have dropped the mod from a 144 to a 120. Well, basically, I ended up explaining to this person that instead of you paying $650 out of pocket now, you're basically paying $22,000 over the next 3 years. Mm-hmm. That didn't fly either. And I said, well, what you're saying is that it's okay for your business. Those are finance terms you're agreeable to. So why don't you tell me how much money you need to borrow, and I'll run to the bank quick and I'll get you as many $650 increments as I can pull out, as long as you're going to pay me $22,000 over 3 years for every single $650 that I loan to you. The payday loan places aren't getting that kind of return on their investment. And it's all because nobody had talked to them. It's crazy that people, and it's interesting, it tells you the strength of a relationship. It's still to some degree, with some of these people. They're banking on relationship. And I'm happy to say I didn't bring this account in. Like I ended the meeting by saying, look, I wanted to just let you know, I understood 15 minutes in, you weren't going to be my client. I stayed here out of respect to my friend that referred me in. But at the end of the day, you're not going to change until you're willing to. And the reason I was brought in was because you've got a budget deficit of $150,000. I just showed you a huge chunk of it and you didn't even want to listen to me. So good luck.
Yeah. I mean, one of the ways that I talk to people is, we talk a lot about the controllable mod, and that's a great tool within ModMaster to be able to show them the money that they have control over. And one of the biggest, success stories in my career is working with somebody that had a mod that was a 189, or the highest one that I've seen. And this was stick
around a while. They get worse.
Yeah. So there was a company that they should have been paying about $50,000 a year, and they were actually paying $180,000. And it was just a example of where they were having a lot of fraudulent claims, and they were kind of reluctant to put in a camera system. And I said, look, if you just need to go ahead and spend this $10,000 on putting this camera system in, and let's see, because they had witnesses that said, hey, I saw this guy literally put his hand in a press brake and break his arm because he wanted work comp. And he didn't want to work. I know, crazy.
That's awesome.
That guy knows how to party.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So we did.
Hold my beer.
They installed cameras, and then now, 5 years later, right? They have a credit mod, and instead of paying $180,000, they're paying the $50,000 that they should be paying. But that's something that we talked about that had nothing to do with insurance, had nothing to do with quoting insurance. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that people make, is they think that it's their job to quote people's insurance. And I just don't believe that is my job to quote people's insurance. And so that's the deal. We try to use a lot of non-insurance words, talk about non-insurance things. And generally that leads to the BOR. Those are those things that lead to those 3-hour meetings where you're just getting to know the person on a business owner to business owner type level. And then you're giving them some ideas, and they're saying, I've never heard of that before. I've never thought of that before. Nobody's ever actually done this before. And then so you just show them what life could be like if they were working with you versus what life is like.
It's interesting, man, because I do everything I can to separate myself from insurance at the very onset of any meeting. I tell people my company is Florida Risk Partners. Insurance is not in the name of my company intentionally. We're here to talk to you about total cost of risk. The difference between, I can run through all the different bullet points. The difference between dealing with me and dealing with an insurance salesperson is they're here to sell you a product. I'm here to solve a problem, and you have a problem, and we're aware of that. And for 45 minutes, I've got it dialed in. I can go for 45 minutes and never use the word insurance at all until the very end. And that's when we get into the hook, right? I'll say, do you like everything that we've had to talk about so far? Is this something that we can agree on that your company would benefit from? Absolutely. Well, I'm sure your next question is, how much do I cost? How much is it? Can you even afford to get this stuff? Because you need it. Well, yeah, well, let me tell you, here's how we feel about insurance. And I know that I'm a licensed agency and a licensed agent and work for a independent agency. So you had to be wondering when it was going to come up. But we view insurance as a commoditized shuffling of paperwork. It's a cost of doing business. It's a certificate to get on a job site. It does nothing for you unless you have a claim. Otherwise, you put money into this in every single year, and it just sits in a binder behind your desk, and that's it. So at the end of the day, how we view insurance is the funding mechanism for you to buy our value proposition. If you want us to do all of the things that we talked about, if you need all of the components of that return to work program and the ability to administer that, if you need to have somebody come in and do manual material handling training and retrain your team and put that program in place, or lockout, tag out, or whatever it is, that's what we really do. The way we get paid to do that is by placing your insurance. And because we're able to place your insurance, you use money that you're already spending to get what we offer for you. And that's it. I mean, that's the hook every single time. We will not go to market for somebody to quote. Just not going to happen. If you ask me to come in and bid on your insurance, that's an automatic red flag. You won't even get an appointment with me. If you ask me, I'll let you quote the renewal if you want. That's okay. Apparently I owe you an apology. I must not have been very good at explaining what it is that we do. But we will write on agent of record letter, never compete on price, and we lay the value out. And if you can't see that value, you're probably not going to be a good fit for our agency anyhow.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that first meeting is always saying, hey, you may not be a good fit for me. Right. And I think that it's important. I think insurance people have to have a little more self-respect than what we have. And I know that's a lot easier for me to say it established, right, than it would be, for somebody else to say that just got in the business yesterday. But if I would tell anybody in anything, and is that, you have to respect yourself. You have to respect what you do. You have to understand that what you do brings value to people's organizations, and people call you for a lot of things. I have people that call me about all kind of things. I mean, especially, having access to Broker Briefcase. I mean, people think you're like the encyclopedia of business, and to a certain degree, having Broker Briefcase is something that does help you be kind of like an encyclopedia at times. But And let me just say this about technology, David, because, I believe in technology. I mean, we're using technology right now. I think it's a really good tool. I have won some really large accounts through just sending out straight content marketing, right? Nothing to do with sales, nothing to do with, hey, I want to give you a quote, or I want to talk about it. We don't even use the word insurance. We just talk about, hey, here's what the Supreme Court did last week. And we send out information based on, various NAIC codes and different things that would apply to these type people. And so that's our plan for technology. We use iWave, we use Agency Revolution to send out some handwritten cards. We use Applied Epic. I know that's kind of in the group that we met in. I'm not sure that Applied Epic is really all that popular. But for an agency that is growing and has quite a few employees, I mean, you really just have to, in our opinion, we got with the big gorilla in the room, and that's it. I mean, that's what we do. And then the way that we get prospects is I use this a lot. It's just a cell phone, and we call people and we see if what we do could be a good fit for them. And then we call people that we think could refer us business, and then we build relationships with them. We try to be a go-giver. I've got a local banker that we referred quite a few deals back and forth. And it really starts with you. People they want to go to. I hear all these people talk about, well, you got to build your referral network, and this, that, and the other. But it's like, if you're the person that's always going, kind of like this to people, gimme, you're really not going to be the person that's going to get their best deals. And so when I try to identify someone that I could work with on, and I don't even use the word referral, I think that's a bad word, is introduction. I can work with somebody on an introductory basis to where I can introduce them to some of my clients. They can introduce me to some of their clients. And that's the word that we use. And that's the word that I use in my daily business, and say, hey, David, could you give me an introduction to so-and-so? I would like to meet this person. And so we try to be go-givers. We pick up the phone and we talk to a lot of people. And then we provide helpful content to people that we think could benefit them in their business. And we never put anything out there that says, hey, we want to sell you insurance. And I think that in a world of all this technology, people talk about all these different things. I think that's where the game is won and lost in middle market insurance. I think there's probably a place for, Google and, I don't even know what this stuff is. I mean, there's a place for that kind of stuff in personal lines. There's a place for that kind of stuff in really small commercial. But I think that people that are that there are $25,000, $50,000, $60,000 revenue deals. They did not get to where they were on the internet, right? A lot of these people built their business pre-internet days. And so we think that's how the business is won and lost. We think it's, won and lost in the numbers, from just understanding, what, like you said, the total cost of risk, like what is your actual cost, right? Not only, I've seen loss runs before with 100 claims in 3 years. And so you can talk about the soft costs a lot, right? You can obviously talk about return to work, but you can think about all the missed time. I mean, like let's add up all the indemnity, right? And all of these claims, and maybe you have missed, maybe your company has missed 3 months of work, right? Out of all these people that have been hurt. So what are those soft costs that we're not even talking about that happen in a workers' comp claim?
Well, and what's funny is listening to people who argue with you about those numbers, right? Because the Bureau of Labor Statistics says that the soft costs associated with any workers' comp claim across all industries is between 2 and 20 times what direct costs are. So when I go in and use that illustration, which we do, I always use 2 because that's the easiest one for me to validate and say. So you have someone who has $500,000 in claims, and you tell them that they have $1 million in soft costs. They want to argue with you every time, and they're going to say, "There's no way we have it." And so I'll start pointing it out. But there's always a point of inflection in that conversation when I stop and I say, "Listen, I want you to understand this from my perspective. Let's look at this logically. You're telling me that you have a mod of 2.25, which is by all accounts an F. You're failing miserably in your experience mod, but you're saying that you're beyond best in class at controlling the soft costs of claims because 2 is what the absolute best companies are getting. And right. You're not even hitting that. So your number's not $1 million. It's probably well over that. But you're right. I mean, businesses don't drill down. And you know what? Agents don't talk about that. They don't. I could get up right now in front of a room of 500 agents, and I could give that conversation about what it's like to talk about soft costs. The next day, they're going to all go out to prospect, and it's going to look like Tommy Boy talking about a T-bone. It's just they're not going to get it right. You know what I'm saying? It's going to be, oh, hey, I heard this guy talk and this is how he gets business. Let me go out and replicate that. No, it's not really that simple. It is, but it's not. You have to understand and be able to pivot and back up what you're saying to people. So, but you're 100% right. Agents are not, we don't paint ourselves in a good light because there's so many things that you've said that are so on point. It's not about giving, it's about getting. And, I don't know. I could go on for days about all of this stuff. I'm just glad it is the way that it is because it makes it easier for transparent people that understand what they're doing and truly have their clients' best interests in mind and have a proven process that's been proven over years. We're going to continue to dominate, and I don't mean that to sound arrogant at all, but I got into this industry because the guy who recruited me into the insurance industry told me it's full of average players. They're all C students. So if you think you're an A player, go in there and you're going to dominate against C people. And I'll tell you right now, he was 100% dead on the money, man. There are very few people that go above and beyond, that do anything outside of what it takes to get by. Part of the reason is you can make $100,000 plus a year being average. Easily. There's a lot of people that are okay with that. They play golf, they drink beer, they make friends, they do this, they do that. And, at the end of the day, they're making 6 figures living off of a renewal book, and they'll just ride off into the sunset one day and be perfectly fine with that. That's not how I'm wired. If that's what's average, I want to be 4 times better than that. Give me $400,000 or $500,000 a year in earnings, to go out and absolutely crush it. And that's the cool part about our industry. It's 100% attainable if you're willing to put it forth the effort, not just in the marketing and the sales activities, but making yourself better. Get the CIC, get the CRM, to a certain degree. Now, I've got friends that have so many designations after their name that, I have to thank them for taking time off of continuing ed to come have lunch with me because they got 27 letters behind their name, 2 sides of their business card. But, the other thing I see, and you're dead on the money with this one too, man. agents are old school. They don't embrace technology. Every one of these agencies that I see complaining about technology complain about one thing: cost. How much? What's the price of it? That's it. We use HubSpot in our agency. HubSpot is not cheap. HubSpot is actually relatively expensive, and it's more expensive to get it built out and run the right way. And I make that investment. The reason why is because I understand that I replaced 3 bodies with the investment in HubSpot, and I did it for about half to a third of what it would have cost me to hire 3 people. Agencies that aren't going to adapt to technology and employ it are going to be consumed by those who are. They're either going to go out of business or they're going to be acquired, and eventually they're going to be forced to adapt anyhow. Especially
given the current landscape.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, if you're in personal lines or small commercial, you're not competing against other agencies. You're competing against Google and Amazon. You're competing against big data. They already have everything they need on you. All they're going to do is streamline it and put it to where you go to order your subscribe and save on Amazon. There's a button that says, while you were shopping, we calculated a approximate homeowner's quote for you. Click here to get more information. The law and numbers tells you they're going to write business doing that. They've already got the platform to put it up.
Yeah, you definitely have to evolve, and I think that technology is a tool, and we have to use it. We have to choose the right tools, and I just think I see a lot of agents out there that they worry so much about, are they picking the right technology for them? Are they picking is it the best one? Is it I look at it and I say, well, I don't know if there's anything better out there than Zywave. I don't personally think that there is, but I know this. I know that it is settled business. For 5 years, we've gotten all of our content from Zywave. That's where we get it. We know how it works. We know how to use it, and we use it. Agency Revolution, look, is it the only one out there? I guess not, but we use it. We use it for what it's supposed to be used for. We do a good job with document management within Epic, and I think all those things are important. But I still believe that all the deals, that these are just tools, right? And the deals are won and lost on me and you and a prospect in a room or on a video conference. And look, I think I heard you say this the other day, that you have to be a good combination to be successful of a technician and of a salesperson.
Yeah, you got to be a hybrid. I say that all the time.
And I think like and I don't even know how you do this. And this is why, like I mentioned Andy Stanley earlier. You hear Andy Stanley talk for an hour and he's done, and you're like, that was an hour? Like that should have been 5, it felt like 5 minutes, right? But look, I know a lot about agency bill. I know a lot about margin clauses. I know a lot about co-insurance. I know a lot about the experience mod. I know how to calculate the lowest possible mod, right? I can do all these different things. I understand, all the different types of business income, right? I know how to write them all. Degrees in risk management, blah, blah, blah. I could go on and on about the education, but really it's just application of all that, right? It's being able to communicate all those things in a language that people can understand.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. That's great that you know all of that, but if you can't translate it, it's worthless.
It just doesn't even matter. And the other thing that I believe is, I think we spend so much time trying to get hired that we don't spend enough time trying to get the other guy fired. And to your point about return to work, I think a lot of people are afraid to take that next step, and they're afraid to say, hey, I think this is a fireable offense. And in order for me to get hired, and you call their name, if you know who the producer is, you call their name, right? You just say, hey, David, for me to get hired for this job, then Kyle is going to have to get fired. And I just need to know if you can do that. And I try to be really upfront about it. And, Scott Addis, I think, is a good insurance teacher. I've been to some of Scott's classes, and I use a lot of what Scott says. And, he just says, he's got, hey, red light, green light. I want full access to information. I want full access to people that are going to make decisions. I want to know that I'm not competing against any other broker except your incumbent, and we're not competing on a quote, right? We're just competing on advice and process. And then last but not least, I got to know that you're going to fire them, that you're willing to fire them. And if you don't get green lights, then you go find another prospect, because that's really not a good prospect. And I can tell you that every time in my career that I've run straight through a red light, it has not ended well for me. And so that's the process that I go through to qualify people. And I tell it right to the person's face. I just cut all that out. And, you know, the book that I'm reading now is They Ask You Answer. And it's Marcus Sheridan. I think it's a really good book. And he talks about just being totally transparent with people. I mean, he's in the pool industry, and he's totally transparent about a fiberglass pool. I mean, I feel like I know a lot about fiberglass pools after reading this guy's book.
It's funny, man. I need to call Marcus and talk to him about that sometime, because I actually wrote a fiberglass pool manufacturer, so I know an incredible amount about fiberglass pools as well, and it's completely worthless at this point for me unless I go after another fiberglass pool manufacturer. But you know, even in Marcus's book, man, it's common sense, dude. People are saying, "Oh, I can't come up with content. I don't know what to write about. I don't know what people are looking for." Take notes when you're in a meeting. You know, every single day you meet with somebody, they're telling you exactly what kind of content you should produce. Just make notes of it and then go do a video about it. Turn it into a blog post. Do both. Whatever. And the other thing is, you know, guys like Addis, I know Scott very, very well. You know, there's something to be said for the bald guy in the room. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Scott's been around the block. He's had his agency in 2 different iterations. And, you know, I have a lot of respect for Scott. I think that his process is airtight. I've put my own spins on it. I was actually worked at an agency where we were part of his Beyond Insurance Group network. So I had, you know, full access to all of his stuff for a while there.
Yeah. And then the only other person I'll mention is Preston Diamond. I mean, Preston taught me a lot about leading with work comp. And he taught me that we're in the people insurance business. And he said that everybody wants to talk about the auto, and they want to talk about the GL, and they want to talk about the property, but nobody understands the comp, right? I mean, the policy is 6 pages long, the actual contract, right? I mean, but it's complicated, right? I mean, all the rules, all the mod, what are all these numbers, what are all these boxes, you know? And so he taught me early on. He said, look, don't let the tail wag the dog here. And don't forget that you're in the people insurance business. And between him and Kevin Ring, we have been very successful, kind of taking a blend of all these people that we've been listening to, and applying the information. But nothing more important than comp. And you have to get into larger comp before it even makes a difference. You can't do it on $5,000 premiums. You just can't.
No, because you're dealing with somebody that wears 15 different hats. You're not dealing with somebody that's dedicated to it. And you're not, at the risk of sounding bad, you're not really dealing with somebody who understands the true value of an employee and all of the costs. It's a different mentality and a different level of sophistication of a buyer when you're in the middle market, as opposed to dealing with a business owner who's also payroll, who's also human resources, I would be a nightmare for a client, for anybody who came in to try and sell me something, because I've got 15 different things that I'm doing all the time. Whereas when I go in and meet with a CFO or a controller or, you know, a CEO or whatever, that's the only thing that they do is I'm there and I have 100% of their attention. And, you know, you make the value case much easier in that arena. So I think that, you know, to sum up, you know, one of the best things you basically said without really coming out and saying it is sharpen the saw, man. You got to learn, you got to find from other people what's working for them. You need to incorporate that into your game, and then you need to refine that into what works for you. Scott Addis is an awesome teacher, but I'm not going to do everything exactly the way that Scott does. That's just not my personality. Scott's personality and mine are completely different, and his sales style when he's presenting is different than what mine is. You know, I don't know Preston Diamond. I know him by reputation, and by all accounts, the guy has taught a lot of people in your part of the world, probably down here too, but I think in the Carolinas and in Georgia specifically, he's taught a lot of people workers' comp. Take what you can from that. Every single one of us should never stop doing that, right? We shouldn't stop reading books. We shouldn't stop going to continuing ed. And I'm not talking about pencil whipping it just to get your credit so you can keep your license active. Go do something that's actually going to make you better, and it'll make you'll be surprised at little tips and tricks that you pick up. So I'm going to wrap up. We've been going for a little over an hour. I mean, I could go for another 2 hours if I wanted to. We could talk all the time. What I will tell you is that I want to have you come back and we can dive deeper in some of this stuff down the road, because I think that, you and I speak the same language, man. I knew that very, very early on. And it's funny because more and more people that I talk to say, hey, I wanted to talk to you because you and I speak the same language. About 95% of the time, they're right. The people that are really doing well in producing in the middle market, no. You can tell by 3 sentences whether or not that person's legit or not,
Yeah.
And for all practical purposes. So listen, I wanted to thank you for coming on today. Appreciate you sharing your story. You guys are doing good things. Tell people if they want to reach out to you, tell them how they can find you.
Yeah. So if you want to reach out to me, I will give you my email. My email is jgurley, Gurley, and that is at hunt-miller.com. Do not put an underscore. Make sure that you put a hyphen. You can shoot me an email. I'll give you my office phone number. It's 478-922-8531. And so, yeah, feel free to reach out to me. And hey, David, just in closing, I want to say this because I think it's important. I mean, I'm passionate about the insurance business. I think it's the best business that anyone could get themselves into. And so I just want to say this. The insurance business has been so good to me in so many different ways. My wife and I have gotten to go on trips all over the world. Gotten to see some really, really cool beaches and just some stuff like that through some incentive travel. I've gotten to meet a ton of smart people that do all different kinds of things, whether it's retail insurance people or whether it's company people or various software vendors, different folks like that. And I just want to say that I'm trying to not just survive the insurance business, I'm trying to thrive in it. And if there's anybody out here that's trying to thrive, I would love to help you because we've been blessed with, again, a lot of technology, a lot of friends, a lot of different relationships. And so, and most of all, we've been blessed with time with my family. I don't have any particular clock in or clock out time. We just go until we get whatever we have to get done. And sometimes we get it done early. Sometimes we get it done late. Make sure you love yourself. If you're out there in insurance production, I think you have to have faith. I think you have to spend time with your family. And if you can find some time for some physical fitness, I think there's nothing better that you can do for yourself than those 3 things. And if you ever need something, contact me, reach out. I'd love to help you in commercial insurance.
Sounds good, man.
Cool.
Thanks again, Josh. Until next time, we'll catch you on the flip side.
Thanks.
You've been listening to the Power Producers Podcast. You can follow Killing Commercial Insurance on Facebook and YouTube. And if you want to take your game to the next level, check out our book, The Extra 2 Minutes, and our website, killingcommercial.com.